Hey guys, what's up? My name is Gabby, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be filming my January wrap-up. The first wrap-up of 2018, and it has been a freaking crazy ass month. In the month of January, I read a total of 8 books, which amounted to 3,647 pages. I gave 2 5-star ratings, 3 4-star ratings, and 3 2-star ratings, so it was kind of a mixed bag this month. I read 3 young adult books and 5 adult books. I read 6 contemporary genre books, 1 mystery thriller, and 1 fantasy. And then I read 2 male authors and 6 female authors. Let's just jump right into what I read. I've been quiet for too long. The first book that I read in the year of 2018 was The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and this is a literary fiction adult novel. It's kind of hard to describe what exactly this book is about. It follows this guy named Richard who is going to this college where he plans on studying Greek. All of these students that are in this Greek class are very snobby and elite students, they're all very wealthy, and Richard comes from a more poor background and he doesn't really fit in with the rest of them, but he really admires them. Right from the beginning of this book, you know that there's a murder and you know who is murdered and how they're murdered, and then the story dives into a flashback of how it happened, and so kind of like a mystery, but at the same time it's not, because you know who was murdered and you know how they died, so it's not really a mystery in that way. So I don't really know why it's classified as a mystery, so it's not like you're trying to figure it out. I guess my main problem with this story was that I didn't like any of the characters in this story, and I know that that's probably intentional. I don't think you're supposed to necessarily like these characters, especially considering this one is almost 600 pages. It's a pretty long story. Bunny is probably one of my least favorite characters of all time. He's one of the biggest homophobic racist pieces of shit I've ever read about. I will say though that some of the parts in this book kind of reminded me of How to Get Away with Murder, the TV show. The way that they were trying to plan the murder and then cover it up, and the way they were all students, and it just reminded me a lot of that show in some way. This story has really gorgeous writing, and for that's one of the reasons why I did really enjoy this. Other than that, it was just okay. It wasn't as great as I was expecting it to be. I think I got my expectations a little bit too high because everybody loves this book so much. This book was okay. I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The second book that I read this month was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng, and I did make a full book talk on this, so I'll be linking that in the description if you want to hear all of my thoughts and spoilery thoughts on this book. This book was my first 5 stars of 2018. I was really, really excited to read this book. I had a feeling I would love it, and I did love it, and it was just so great. And this is a contemporary fiction novel. It takes place in Shaker Heights, Ohio in the 1990s, and it follows this family called the Richardsons. They have this house, and then they have another smaller house that they rent out to people, and one day they rent out the space to this mom and daughter named Mia and Pearl. Miss Richardson has 4 kids. She has 2 daughters and 2 boys, and so Pearl is the same age as they are, so they all their lives start to intertwine, and the story starts off with a fire, and one of the kids has burned the house down and ran away, and you're trying to figure out what happened and what led up to this fire. This book just has a lot to say about motherhood and the pool of motherhood and what makes someone a mother. It's very thought-provoking in that sense, and the writing is just so gorgeous, and these characters feel so real, and so it's just great. It's great. It was a 5-star book for me, so definitely check out my book talk if you want to know more. The third book I read this month was The Woman in the Window by AJ Finn. This was one of my January selections from Book of the Month, a mystery thriller, and it's about this woman named Anna Fox, and she hasn't left her apartment in 10 months, and she is afraid to leave her apartment, and so in the meanwhile she spies on all of her neighbors. She witnesses this really dramatic incident, and then it changes the course of the story. And yeah, this book is getting a lot of hype lately, and I think I just don't understand why. Over 400 pages, and it's boring. I mean, the whole incident that kicks off this story really doesn't even start until page 180 or so. So for the first 180 pages, it's just this boring character building. Isn't very different from other thrillers that you've probably read. It reminded me a lot of The Girl on the Train, because it's our main character is using alcohol and drugs, and she's an unreliable narrator, and she's spying on this couple. It felt very repetitive and boring in the sense that every single scene, at least in the beginning, is just of her drinking and abusing her drugs that doctors prescribe her, and talking to patients online because she is like a psychologist, and so she talks to her patients on this website, and it's just like scene after scene of that, and like her talking to her family that's left and we don't know why, and then her spying on the neighbors again and again and again. It's just like this really repetitive cycle. I just got bored with it really fast, so I ended up giving this one 2 out of 5 stars. It was not really my jam. Fourth book I read this month was A Million Junes by Emily Henry. This is a young adult fantasy novel. I say fantasy because it's not really fantasy. It's like a contemporary with some magical realism fantasy stuff thrown in. It follows this girl named June who lives on this huge piece of land with her family, and her dad believes that their family is cursed, and like they believe they live on this land that's like magic. And it's kind of hard for me to describe what this book is about, but it's basically a really powerful father-daughter story because her father is dead, and he's dead right from the beginning, and she's still kind of dealing with the grief of that, but she finds a way to communicate with him through this like magical realism part of the book. And so it's this really moving, powerful father and daughter story that I really enjoyed in this book. Didn't really like love the relationship between June and this guy Saul, and it was very like Romeo and Juliet because they both believed that their families were cursed and they were like enemies. But yeah, I do think that this writing is really beautiful, and that there are a lot of really powerful quotes about grief and family and love. The ending did hit me pretty hard, like more than I expected, and I got a little bit emotional at the end. For that, I bumped it up to 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read this month was They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. This is a young adult story, and in this universe, Deathcast calls you the day you're going to die. And then they have this app called The Last Friend that you can go and find the last friend that you can have. It's both the day that you're gonna die, and so you can hang out with someone who's also dying that day and like experience your last day on Earth together. This story follows 2 boys named Mateo and Rufus who meet through the Last Friend app because they both get phone calls that morning saying that they're gonna die today. The premise of this book is kind of badass, and it could have been really cool. Like, it kind of sounds like a very mild episode of Black Mirror. You know, like you get a phone call on the day you're gonna die from like Deathcast, like what? But unfortunately, this story just ended up being kind of like okay. Mateo and Rufus's romance is obviously so insta-love because it's all taking place on one day, and by the end of the day they're just like loving each other so much, like they want to die for each other, and didn't really like love these characters the way I wanted to, and I wasn't really affected emotionally by this book the way I expected to. The beginning and the ending of this book are easily the best parts, and then the middle section of this book gets so boring with all these scenes of Mateo and Rufus just running around the town trying new things and spending their last day together, and it's just like, you know what's coming, so it's just kind of like you're waiting for the end the whole time. And I also didn't really see the point of them having all these chapters from other characters' point of views. I thought it just kind of like took me out of it because like not only do we get chapters from Mateo and Rufus's perspectives, but we also get chapters from like a ton of their friends' perspectives and just like random people, and I don't know, it just didn't really work for me. Ended up giving this one 2.5 out of 5 stars. It just wasn't really as great as I was hoping it would be, and it was just kind of boring overall, and I didn't really like love it. So the 6th book that I read this month was A Little Life by HANYA YANAGIHARA. This book gutted me emotionally, and it was another 5 out of 5 star book from me, like one of the best books I've ever read. I made a full book talk for this book as well, which I don't do often, and so you know, if I make a full book talk for a book, that probably means it's one of the greatest books I've ever read. Full book talk is on my channel, and I'll put the link in the description if you would like to watch that. This is a literary fiction novel that follows 4 young men, and it spans decades. It follows them from their 20s throughout the rest of their lives. This story centers on Jude, who is this mysterious, crippled man who's experienced this unimaginable, terrible childhood. It really centers on Jude, but then we also get to see a lot of the lives of his 3 closest friends, Willem, JB, and Malcolm. And Willem is his closest out of all of those. Willem is his roommate. Willem and Jude's relationship is really what drives this story. It's one of the most depressing books I've ever read. I feel like I need to put out a trigger warning that there's trigger warnings for literally everything. Even though this is one of the most depressing books I've ever read, it's also one of the best reading experiences that I've ever had. My copy of this book is 815 pages. So it was definitely a journey. It took me a week to read this. Jude and Willem's friendship is like one of my favorite things that I've ever read. ever. And the writing in this book is so gorgeous and thought-provoking, and I underlined so many passages that moved me. And every word in this book is perfectly crafted. It's just, oh my god, you guys, it's so good. So just go and see my book talk if you want to know more about it, and just go and read it. It's so good. 5 out of 5, amazing greatness. The 7th book I read this month is She Regrets Nothing by Andrea Dunlop. Thank you to Atria Books for sending me a copy of this. It's coming out February 6th. This story follows this 23-year-old girl named Layla Lawrence who becomes an orphan. Her parents both die, and she lives in Michigan in this small town, and she discovers at the funeral of her parents that she has rich cousins living in Manhattan, New York that she never knew about. And so she goes and moves to New York, Manhattan, to live with her rich cousins. Yeah, and then this book is like rich people and their rich people problems. This book just wasn't really for me, I think, because I didn't like any of these characters, but the only character I did like was Liberty, because she worked in the publishing industry with books and she suffers from some anxiety issues, and like I just related to her the most out of everyone in this book. But I really couldn't stand the main character, Layla. She just like overnight becomes this spoiled, privileged brat that I like couldn't stand. The typical selfish gold digger, social climber trying to, you know, get out of this small town bubble and work her way up the social ladder. But if you want to read a book about a bunch of selfish, hot characters who just bitch about their rich people problems and flirting with billionaires and, you know, that type of thing, then totally check this one out. But it just wasn't my thing. I ended up giving this one 2 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I read this month was Love, Life, and the List by KASIE West. This is a young adult, fluffy contemporary romance, and it was very cute, just like all of KASIE West's other books that I've read. So this one follows this girl named Abby who's a painter, and she desperately wants to get her paintings shown in this art show, but when she goes to show her boss her paintings, her boss says that her paintings don't have any heart. She writes down this list of experiences that she feels like she needs to have in order to become a better painter. She's also secretly, but not so secretly, in love with her best friend Cooper. Oh my god, this story was so cute. I loved Abby as a main character. I just related to her a lot because she's definitely the type of person who's comfortable in her safe bubble and doesn't really like to try new things because she's afraid of change, and I'm totally there with her on that. And I love the idea of like making a list and the characters have to go through this big arc and change while they go through the list. It's such a trope that I'm like down for. I love it. I also really loved her family dynamics, and I thought her family was really interesting and unique because her mom doesn't like to leave the house. Like, it's really hard for them to get her mom out of the house, and then her dad is in the army and he's like away in the military, and then her grandpa is like the most sarcastic character in the book. And that one was so cute, and so I ended up giving that one 4 out of 5 stars, and it's perfect to read in the summer, which I did not do. But yeah, those are all of the books that I read in January. I read 8 of them. Favorite books of the month were definitely A Little Life and Little Fires Everywhere. They both have little in the title, like how weird. And my least favorite book of the month was probably She Regrets Nothing because hashtag rich people problems. This month has been fucking wild, and if you've seen my vlog that I posted, then I'm sure you've seen like why. Basically, earlier this month I had to put my dog down the day before my birthday, which was just completely devastating. I've had her since I was 13 years old, and it was just really tragic and terrible to go through, especially the day before my birthday. It was the worst. And then I celebrated turning 23 years old, and 23, it's like, but after you turn 21, it's not fun anymore, you know? It's just like, oh, okay, it's my birthday again. My sister turned 21 on the 27th, and that was really fun. And then we got a new puppy, and she's a 4-month-old German Shepherd. Her name is Phoenix, and she's already the light of my life, and it's just been an emotional, crazy, hectic month. And not to mention, I'm finishing up my last quarter at community college now, and I got my acceptance letter to the university that I wanted to go to. This month, I discovered Black Mirror, and I binge watched the entire series, and like I just finished the end of season 4 a couple of nights ago. Would you guys want me and my sister to do like a Black Mirror review type of video and talk about our favorite episodes and that kind of thing? Because like I really want to do that. I'm really excited about this TV show. It's like probably one of my new favorite TV shows of all time, and I loved it so much, and I have so much to say about a lot of the episodes. So if that's something that you guys would like want to see, then let me know, because I would love to do that. Thank you guys so much for watching as always. And how many books did you guys read in January? What were your favorite books that you read this month? What were your least favorites of the month? And we could talk about it in the comments. And like, if you've read any of these 8 books that I mentioned, then what are your thoughts on them? And I also just wanted to mention that I'm currently reading Keep Her Safe by K.A. Tucker, and I did get a good like halfway through it, but I just couldn't finish it in time. So you'll definitely see that one in my February wrap up next month. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I will see you guys next time. I've been quiet for too long.